There is a particular kind of quiet that only comes with rain at night, when the whole world seems to lean in a little closer and whisper softly that it's finally time to rest. Anya heard it begin just after sunset, a light tapping against her window, hesitant at first, like someone knocking politely before deciding to stay. She was curled in the armchair by her window with a book open on her lap, though she had stopped reading some time ago. Her eyes drifted instead toward the glass, watching the first drops gather and slide slowly down the cool pane. The book was an old favorite, its spine soft and cracked from years of rereading, a quiet story about a lighthouse keeper who spent his days cataloguing the different sounds the sea made in every season. She had read it perhaps a dozen times by now, always in autumn, always on the first properly rainy evening of the year, as though the book itself were a small ritual marking the change of season. Tonight, she had barely made it past the third page before her attention had wandered, unhurried, toward the window instead. Her small apartment sat on the top floor of an old building, tucked beneath a sloped roof that made the ceiling curve gently near the windows. She loved this room most on nights like tonight, when the rain played its quiet music directly above her, a soft, steady drumming against the tiles that felt less like weather and more like a lullaby someone had built into the house itself, note by note, tile by tile, over all the years the old roof had stood there. The day behind her had been an ordinary one, full of small, unremarkable tasks, emails answered, errands run, a slow walk to the market beneath a sky that had already been threatening rain since early afternoon. None of it lingered with any weight now. It had simply happened the way ordinary days do, and dissolved quietly the moment she stepped back through her own front door and heard the first drops beginning against the glass, tapping out their slow, patient rhythm as though counting down the last minutes of daylight. She set her book down on the small table beside her and rose slowly, padding across the wooden floor in thick socks to the kitchen, where a kettle waited on the stove, its copper surface catching the last dim light of the evening. She filled it with water, lit the burner, and stood for a moment listening to the rain grow heavier outside, drumming now against the window in a full, steady rhythm. While the kettle warmed, she moved around her kitchen unhurriedly, taking down a favorite mug, pale blue with a small chip near the handle that she had never quite gotten around to minding. She spooned in a little honey and a few dried chamomile flowers from a jar on the shelf, the same kind her mother used to keep in a similar jar, in a similar kitchen many years ago and many rainy nights ago. The kitchen itself was small, barely large enough for two people to stand comfortably side by side, but she had grown fond of its close, familiar corners over the years, the way the single overhead light caught the edge of the copper pot hanging by the stove, the small collection of mismatched spice jars lined up along the windowsill, each one labeled in her own handwriting, softened now by steam and time. A folded dish towel hung from the oven handle, patterned with faded lemons, a gift from a friend long since moved away to another city, another rainy window somewhere far from here. She thought of her mother often on nights like this, not with sadness exactly, though there was a soft ache folded somewhere inside the memory, but with a kind of gentle warmth, the way one might think of a favorite blanket left behind in an old house. Her mother had always said that rain was the sky's way of resting, that clouds grew tired of carrying so much water and simply needed, every so often, to let it all go and feel light again. Anya had been very young when she first heard that idea, sitting on the kitchen floor of their old house when rain fell outside, and she had believed it completely, the way children believe the small, strange truths adults hand to them. Even now, as an adult with a kettle of her own and a kitchen of her own, some quiet part of her still believed it a little. she could still picture that old kitchen clearly if she let herself. The yellow light above the table, a little too warm, a little too golden, the way old bulbs often were. The screen door that never quite latched properly, rattling gently whenever the wind picked up. Her mother's hands, always slightly dusted with flour or tea leaves or the soil from her small window garden, moving calmly between tasks the way hands move when they have done the same small motions 10,000 times before and no longer need to think about them. A worn wooden radio sat on the counter, always tuned to some quiet station, playing old, unhurried songs, low enough to be more felt than heard. On nights like this one, her mother would sometimes hum quietly while she worked, some tune Anya had never learned the name of and had never thought to ask about back when there was still time to ask. It didn't matter now. The melody itself had stayed with her, wordless and soft, resurfacing sometimes at the edges of sleep, the way old songs do, arriving uninvited and welcome all at once. She remembered one storm in particular, louder than most, when the power had gone out for a few hours and her mother had lit candles all through the house instead of worrying over it, turning the whole evening into something closer to an adventure than an inconvenience. They had sat together at the kitchen table, playing a simple card game by candlelight, the rain hammering against the windows, thunder rolling somewhere close enough to rattle the cups in the cupboard, and Anya, only 7 or 8 at the time, had felt not frightened, but entirely safe, wrapped in the golden candlelight and her mother's calm, unhurried voice, explaining the rules of the game for the 3rd or 4th time. At some point, she remembered, her mother had simply stopped explaining the rules altogether and let her win every hand for the rest of the night, neither of them ever quite admitting it out loud. That feeling, more than any single memory, was what returned to her now, decades later, in her own small kitchen, with her own kettle and her own quiet rain falling outside. Not the specific words or games, most of which had long since faded, but the feeling itself, safe and warm and entirely unbothered by the storm outside, as though the rain was simply another guest to welcome in rather than something to fear. The kettle began to sing softly, and she poured the hot water over the honey and chamomile, watching the pale petals swirl and settle slowly at the bottom of the mug. Steam rose in a thin curl, carrying a warm floral smell through the small kitchen, mixing gently with the cool mineral scent of rain drifting in through the cracked window above the sink. She stood for a moment longer in the small kitchen, simply holding the warm mug, feeling grateful in a quiet, unremarkable way for such a small thing, a warm drink, a dry roof, a rainy evening with nowhere else to be. It was not the kind of gratitude that needed to be spoken or even fully noticed, only felt, the way warmth is felt, spreading slowly outward from some small, steady center. She carried her tea back to the armchair, wrapping both hands around the warm mug, and settled deeper into the cushions, pulling a soft grey blanket over her knees. Outside, the rain had found its full rhythm now, falling steadily over the rooftops and streets below, gathering in small rivers along the gutters, tapping against every window in the building in the same soft, unhurried pattern. She looked out at the street below. The street lamps had come on, their light blurred and golden through the falling rain, each one wrapped in a soft halo of mist. A few cars passed slowly, their headlights sweeping long yellow streaks across the wet pavement, and then the street settled back into stillness, empty and glistening, waiting quietly beneath the falling rain. Across the street, the small shop on the corner had already closed for the night, its metal shutter pulled halfway down, though a single light still burned somewhere inside, warm and low, the kind of light left on simply out of habit rather than need. Beyond it, the rooftops of the neighboring buildings stretched away in uneven rows, dark and glistening, their chimneys sending up faint, scattered curls of smoke that the rain bent gently sideways before dissolving them into the grey evening air. Somewhere below, a door closed softly, and footsteps hurried across the courtyard, quick and light, someone dashing the last few steps home before the rain could catch them completely. Anya smiled faintly, sipping her tea, glad to be already inside, already warm, already exactly where she wanted to be. A little later, a ginger cat appeared beneath the awning of the shop across the street, shaking one paw with obvious distaste before settling into a dry patch beneath the striped canvas, tucking its tail neatly around it and watching the rain with the same unhurried patience Anya felt in her own chest. She watched it for a while, comforted by its stillness, by the simple fact that some small, warm creature out there had also decided tonight that there was nowhere better to be than exactly where it was. She picked her book back up, though she still did not read it. Instead, she let it rest open on her lap, her thumb marking the page, while her eyes returned again and again to the window, to the soft grey light beyond it, to the rain falling in long silver threads past the glass. The apartment around her felt small and complete in a way it rarely did during the busy hours of daylight. The lamp beside her chair cast a warm circle of light over the room, leaving the corners soft and shadowed, comfortable rather than dark. Her small bookshelf stood quietly against one wall, its spines a familiar, uneven skyline she knew by heart, gathered slowly over years of quiet Sunday afternoons in second-hand shops. A single candle sat unlit on the windowsill, and she reached over now and lit it, watching the small flame catch and steady, adding its own soft glow to the room, mixing gently with the lamplight and the blue-grey light drifting in from outside. On the small table beside her sat a few other quiet things, a smooth grey stone she had picked up from a riverbank years ago, a photograph in a simple wooden frame, a half-finished cup of water from the night before that she had forgotten to empty. None of it needed tidying tonight. The rain outside seemed to excuse every small, unfinished thing, folding it into the same soft, unhurried mood that had settled over the whole room. She thought, sitting there, of all the other rainy nights she had spent in rooms like this one, in different cities, different apartments, different years, and how the rain always seemed to carry the same quiet promise, no matter where she was. Rest now. There is nowhere else you need to be. The rain outside grew heavier still, drumming steadily against the roof, and somewhere far off, a low roll of thunder murmured through the clouds, soft and distant, more like a deep breath than a warning. Anya did not mind thunder, not the gentle kind that rumbled quietly at the edges of a storm. She found it, if anything, comforting, a low, steady heartbeat beneath the softer patter of the rain, the whole sky seeming to exhale slowly, again and again, in no particular hurry to stop. She finished her tea slowly, setting the empty mug on the small table beside her, and pulled the blanket a little higher over her knees. Her eyelids had grown heavy without her quite noticing, her breathing slowing to match the steady rhythm outside, the rain and the thunder and the small crackle of the candle all blending together into one long, gentle sound. The ginger cat across the street had curled itself into a tighter circle beneath the awning, and somewhere down the block a window shutter clicked softly closed for the night. She closed her book fully now, setting it aside, and simply sat for a while, listening. The rain did not seem to be lessening. If anything, it grew steadier, fuller, wrapping the whole building in its soft, continuous sound, blurring the edges of the evening until she could no longer quite tell where the rain ended and her own tiredness began. Eventually she rose, moving slowly through her small apartment, gathering her things for bed with the unhurried motions of someone who had nowhere left to be that night. She blew out the candle gently, its thin ribbon of smoke curling upwards before dissolving into the dark. She rinsed her mug in the sink, the sound of running water mixing briefly with the steady rain outside before she turned the tap off again, and the rain alone filled the silence. She checked, out of old habit, that the front door was locked, though she already knew it would be, and paused once more by the window in the front room, watching the rain fall over the quiet street below, before turning off the lamp and letting the apartment settle into a soft, comfortable dark. Her bedroom sat just off the small hallway, its window facing the same street, the same soft glow of street lamps through falling rain. She changed into warm pajamas, the fabric soft and familiar against her skin, and pulled back the thick quilt on her bed, patterned faintly with small faded flowers that had softened with years of washing. On the small nightstand beside the bed, a second, smaller lamp waited, one she rarely bothered to turn on, preferring instead the soft, natural dark that came with rainy nights like this one, lit only by whatever pale light slipped in through the curtains. She brushed her hair slowly in front of the narrow mirror by the door, watching the rain-blurred reflection of the street lamp glow faintly behind her in the glass. There was no hurry in any of it, no clock to check, no alarm to set beyond the one she kept from habit rather than need. Tomorrow could wait exactly where it was, somewhere just beyond the edge of tonight, patient and unbothered, the way tomorrow always seemed to be on nights like this. She paused for a moment before climbing in, standing at the window in her socked feet, watching the rain streak silently down the dark glass. The street below had emptied further now, only the occasional gleam of a wet railing or a parked car catching the golden light of the street lamp. A light mist had begun to rise faintly from the warm pavement where the rain met the last of the day's heat, curling upward in thin, ghostly ribbons before dissolving into the night air. She climbed in slowly, sinking into the mattress, pulling the quilt over her shoulders, and lay for a moment simply listening. The rain sounded different from here, slightly muffled by the thicker curtains, but no less present, a steady, comforting hush surrounding the whole room. Somewhere above, on the sloped ceiling nearest the window, she could hear it tapping gently against the old roof tiles, the same soft rhythm that had followed her all evening. She turned onto her side, facing the window, watching the faint grey light shift and ripple against the curtain as rain continued to fall beyond it. Her thoughts began to loosen and drift, the sharp edges of the day slowly softening, worries and small tasks unraveling gently at the corners until they no longer felt urgent, no longer felt like anything at all. She thought of small, unimportant things, the way the mind often does in those last soft minutes before sleep. The particular sound her front door made when it closed, the smell of the market that afternoon, wet cardboard and ripe fruit, and someone's cigarette smoke drifting past too quickly to mind. A stranger on the bus who had smiled at nothing in particular, lost in their own thoughts, the way people sometimes do. The way the barista at her usual coffee always drew a small, slightly crooked leaf in the foam of her coffee, no matter how busy the morning rush became. The particular blue of the sky that morning before the clouds had gathered, a colour she had noticed and then immediately forgotten until just now. None of it meant anything, and all of it felt, somehow, gently important. The small, ordinary furniture of an ordinary day, settling quietly into rest alongside her. Her mind returned once more, and without effort, to her mother's kitchen. The low ceiling, the yellow light, the smell of chamomile and rain drifting in through an old screen door. She thought of the pale blue mug and the honey jar and the sound of small feet on a wooden floor, hers many years ago, padding across to the window to watch the storm. Slowly, gently, the boundary between memory and dream began to blur, the way it always does just before sleep arrives, and Anya felt herself sinking, unhurried, into something soft and warm and quiet. She dreamed, and in her dream the rain was still falling, but she was somewhere else now, somewhere new and yet entirely familiar, standing at the edge of a wide, calm garden she had never seen before, and yet somehow knew completely, the way one sometimes knows a place only in sleep. The rain here fell in slow silver threads, catching moonlight instead of street lamp light, and every leaf and petal around her glistened softly, heavy with water, bending gently under its weight, each drop catching a small point of moonlight before sliding slowly off toward the dark soil below. The air in the dream smelled of wet earth and something sweeter beneath it, jasmine perhaps, or honeysuckle, though she could not have said which, only that it reminded her, faintly, of warm evenings she could no longer quite place. Tall hedges rose on either side of her, dark and glistening, their shapes softened by the rain into something more like memory than plant, and somewhere beyond them, unseen, she could hear the low, steady murmur of water moving over stone. A stone path wound ahead of her, pale and smooth, leading between rows of tall, sleepy flowers that nodded slightly in the falling rain. She began to walk, unhurried, her bare feet cool against the wet stone, and found that the rain did not touch her at all, though she could feel its coolness in the air, could hear its soft patter all around, could see it falling in long silver lines through the moonlight. The path curved gently after a while, leading her beneath the row of tall trees whose branches met overhead, forming a loose, dripping canopy that softened the rain into something even gentler, a slow, scattered patter rather than a steady fall. Moss grew thick along the roots of the trees, soft and faintly glowing, as though it had gathered up whatever little moonlight slipped beneath the leaves and kept it stored there, waiting. Small mushrooms clustered here and there at the base of the trunks, pale and round, and the whole path smelled of wet bark and old leaves, rich and green and entirely unhurried. Somewhere overhead, a single owl called once, low and soft, more a greeting than a warning, and then the forest settled back into its patient, dripping quiet. She walked without any sense of distance, the way one does in dreams, the path simply continuing for as long as it needed to, no shorter and no longer. At one point, a small deer stepped out from between the trees ahead of her, pausing in the middle of the path to look at her with calm, dark eyes before turning unhurriedly back into the undergrowth, leaving barely a sound behind it, only a faint rustle of wet leaves settling back into place. Anya felt no surprise at this, only a quiet, easy warmth, the sense that everything in this dream, the rain, the trees, the deer, belonged exactly where it was, and so did she. The trees thinned slowly, and the path began to widen, the canopy above opening again to the soft silver rain and the pale wash of moonlight beyond it. Somewhere ahead, she could hear water, not the rain itself, but something slower and deeper, a gentle lapping, patient and rhythmic, growing clearer with every unhurried step. The air changed too, the green, mossy scent of the trees giving way slowly to something cooler and cleaner, the particular smell of open water on a rainy night, mineral and calm. The garden opened after a while to a small pond, its surface rippling gently with each falling drop, small silver circles blooming and fading, overlapping endlessly across the dark water. Lily pads drifted here and there near the edges, broad and dark, each one cupping a small trembling puddle of rainwater at its center. A wooden bench sat near the water's edge, half covered by the low branches of a willow tree, its long leaves trailing gently into the pond, swaying slightly with some breeze Anya could not feel, but could somehow sense, soft and slow, moving through the whole dream like a held breath. She sat on the bench, and the willow's branches curved protectively above her, sheltering her without quite blocking the sound of rain, which continued all around, patient and steady, filling the whole dream with its gentle rhythm. She watched the pond's surface ripple and settle, an endless, unhurried pattern that asked nothing of her at all. Somewhere beneath the surface, pale shapes moved slowly, fish perhaps, or only shifting light, drifting without hurry through the dark water, in no more rush to be anywhere than she was. After a while, she became aware that someone was sitting beside her on the bench, and though she could not clearly see a face, she understood, in the effortless way one understands things in dreams, that it was her mother, or something like her mother, warm and familiar, radiating the same quiet comfort that had once filled that small kitchen so long ago. There was no surprise in the recognition, only a soft, settling relief, the way one feels finding a favorite chair already waiting, exactly where it has always been. They did not speak. There seemed no need for words in this soft, rain-filled garden. They simply sat together, watching the silver rain fall over the dark water, listening to its endless, gentle rhythm. And Anya felt, for the length of that quiet dream, entirely and completely at peace. After a while, without any real sense of moving, Anya found herself no longer on the bench, but drifting gently along the pond's dark surface in a small wooden boat, its sides worn smooth by years of quiet use. She lay back against a folded blanket at its base, watching the willow branches slide slowly overhead, their long leaves trailing soft lines of water across her arms as she passed beneath them. The boat moved with no oars, no current she could name, only the same unhurried logic that dreams follow, carrying her gently onward, simply because it seemed the right direction to go. The rain kept falling around her, soft silver threads catching the moonlight, and the pond widened slowly into something more like a still, quiet lake, its far shore lost in a gentle mist. Small lights appeared along the distant bank, warm and yellow, like a row of lanterns set out to guide her, though toward what she could not say, and did not feel any need to ask. The water made no sound beneath the boat, only the rain, patient and steady, filling the whole dream with its familiar rhythm. The boat itself seemed to know its own way, turning gently whenever the shoreline curved, slowing whenever a low branch leaned close overhead, as though some quiet, unseen hand were guiding it along, careful and unhurried, the way a parent might guide a small child's hand across a page. She trailed one hand over the side, feeling the cool water part gently around her fingers, and watched the ripples spread outward in slow, widening circles before fading back to stillness, one after another, endless and unhurried. Somewhere behind her, faint and wordless, she could still hear the same soft tune her mother used to hum, carried now not from any kitchen, but from the mist itself, or perhaps from nowhere at all, simply present, the way certain comforts are in dreams, without needing an explanation. The boat drifted on, unhurried, beneath the sky she could not quite see through the falling rain, past reeds that bent gently at the water's edge, past the dark shapes of sleeping birds tucked along the shoreline, their heads folded beneath their wings. Nothing asked anything of her here. There was nowhere to arrive, no task waiting, no clock counting down the hours until morning. There was only the rain and the water and the slow, warm presence beside her that had never quite left, the whole quiet world holding her as gently as the small boat itself. Eventually, the boat came to rest, without any sound of arrival, against a low wooden dock lit by the same warm lanterns she had seen from across the water. She stepped out onto the smooth, damp boards, her feet leaving no prints, and found a small stone cottage waiting a short way up the shore, its windows glowing amber, its chimney sending up a thin, steady curl of smoke that the rain seemed to part gently around rather than extinguish. Ivy climbed one wall of the cottage, dark and glossy with rain, and a small wooden bench sat beside the door, empty, as though someone had only just stepped inside and meant to return in a moment. She did not need to know who. It felt somehow like it might have been meant for her, or for anyone tired enough to find their way there. The door left unlocked, the cup left warm, on the small chance that someone tonight might wander up from the water needing exactly that. The rain around them began slowly to soften, its silver threads growing thinner, quieter, until the sound blurred gently into something even softer, something closer to breathing than rainfall. The garden around her seemed to loosen at its edges, the flowers and the pond and the willow tree all dissolving gently into a soft, warm darkness, comfortable rather than empty, like the last moment before a candle finally goes out. The little cottage light lingered longest of all, a small, warm point in the deepening dark, before it too faded gently, not vanishing so much as settling somewhere just out of sight, the way a room feels present even after the lights go down. Somewhere far above the dream, faint and distant, Anya could still hear the real rain falling against her window, steady and unhurried, weaving itself quietly into the soft fabric of her sleep. The two rains, the dreamed and the real, blurred together until she could no longer tell which one she was truly hearing, and it did not seem to matter at all. Her breathing had grown slow and even now, her whole body loose and warm beneath the quilt, sinking deeper into the mattress with each soft breath. The dream did not end so much as widen. The garden and the bench and the gentle presence beside her folding slowly into a wider, quieter darkness, warm and formless, holding her the way deep sleep always does, without edges, without hurry, without anything at all left to do but rest. Outside her window, the real rain continued through the night, tapping softly against the glass, drumming gently over the rooftops, filling the sleeping city with its slow, endless rhythm. It fell over quiet streets and empty courtyards, over parked cars and shuttered shops, over the striped awning where a ginger cat still dozed, tucked safely out of the wet, over every rooftop for miles, patient and unhurried, exactly as it had fallen countless nights before, and would fall countless nights again. It fell, too, over the small market she had walked through that afternoon, over the quiet corner shop with its single habitual light, over every narrow street and sloped rooftop in the whole sleeping neighborhood, all of it hushed now beneath the same soft, steady sound. Somewhere below, the last lit window along the street finally went dark, and the whole building seemed to settle more fully into sleep, walls and floors and old wooden beams all quietly at rest beneath the steady rain. A soft draught moved once through the hallway outside Anya's door, gentle enough to pass unnoticed, and then everything grew still again, the rain the only sound left awake in the whole quiet house. And beneath her thick quilt, in her small room under the sloped ceiling, Anya slept on, deep and peaceful, wrapped in the soft, steady sound of rain, her dreams quiet, her breathing slow, carried gently through the whole long night by the same soft rhythm that had first tapped so politely at her window hours before, asking only to be let in and to be allowed for a little while to help her rest. Whatever dreams came after the garden and the lake and the small warm cottage on the shore, she would not remember them clearly by morning, only a lingering softness, a sense of having been somewhere gentle, somewhere unhurried, somewhere the rain had asked nothing of her at all.